Welcome to She Sells Radio. My guest today is someone who I have so much respect for in the sales community, and she's on a mission to empower more women to get into sales and sales leadership. So let me share a bit of her background and her bio, and then we're going to get into what I know is going to be a really powerful interview. So Lori Richardson wants to attract more women to sales and sales leadership. And after 15 years in B2B selling and sales leadership, when not running sales consultancy Score More Sales, Lori heads Women Sales Pros, a community showcasing top women in sales. She created the She Sells Summit to bring more than a dozen women in sales groups together for biannual virtual events. And she hosts the award-winning Conversations with Women in Sales podcast, which I was super honored to come on and chat with her a couple months ago on that show. A top sales thought leader and sought after national speaker, Lori is also the author of the book She Sells: Attract, Promote, and Retain Great Women in B2B Sales. Lori, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Elise. It's so great to be here.
It is so great to be here. And I'm sure my listeners are like, okay, well, you all definitely have the She Sells in common.
We do. We've been on our little parallel tracks. So.
But here's what I so appreciate about that, because you and I just really connected this year, like for the first time, one-on-one, even though we've got mutual friends and mutual acquaintances. And what I loved about it was when we both kind of realized, oh, like we're both really passionate about this and this brand. It was such a collaborative type of conversation. And I feel like that's, getting to know you and getting to know your heart. I feel like that's so much of who you are, which is how can we elevate the community in sales for women. And so I want to start by talking about, we're going to talk more about the work you're doing and how more women can get into sales and get promoted in sales. But can we just start with some of your backstory? If someone is not familiar with you and your work and what you've done, what got you into sales? Tell us a little bit about your journey there, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I grew up in Seattle, Washington. I was youngest of 5, and my mom had really severe migraines, so she got on medication, which made her sleep a lot, unfortunately. But I luckily got under the wing of my grandmother, who had a women's clothing store. And I kind of grew up in her store and worked from the time I was, pretty small, steaming merchandise in the back. And it was, a nicer women's apparel store. So her competition would be like Nordstrom at the time, which was very small back then in Seattle. And she, just took me along, and I went with her to the market weeks to buy the merchandise. And I saw her interact with a lot of really aggressive men who came in to sell clothing to her and all the other buyers who were buying for their stores. And I really saw her stand up to these guys, and she knew who her clientele was. And if they showed her some trend that she knew her customers didn't like, she would say, no, because my customers won't buy it. And sometimes they would say, oh, Mrs. Hall, you're crazy. Like you're out of it. You're just too, you're too outdated. This is the latest thing. And then she wouldn't buy it, and it would be a trend and not an ongoing product. And they would apologize to her at the next market week that we would go to, and they'd say, "Oh, Mrs. Hall, you were right. Midi skirts or maxi skirts or whatever they were, you were totally right." And she goes, "Yeah, I know." And so I think from an early age, I learned that was a woman in my life who could stand up to the strong opinions of men. And so when I got into sales, I was in my early 20s, and I became a single mom. So I was working as a teacher, but I couldn't make the money that I needed to support my family. So I found technology sales, and I was able to maneuver some of the more aggressive, folks, and was able to, launch a career in technology, and, have been around it ever since.
How many, I'm curious, when you got into technology sales, how many women were there on the sales team or around you?
Yeah, I
in that
was
role?
really lucky because I worked for this company. So this was the early 80s or mid 80s. 1984 is when the Macintosh came out. If anybody saw saw replays of those commercials that Apple made ingeniously, and I sold the first IBM computers and the first compact computers and
Wow.
Hewlett Packard.
Huh.
And yeah, and I was lucky because at the company I ended up at, we had a couple of really amazing women in corporate sales, and I had a couple of female peers, and it wasn't anything about gender. It was so, I don't know, I just feel like it was like a cocoon where I got my first sense of, working in technology. And, occasionally customers would be a pain. The male customers would be kind of an issue, but other than that, we got along great. And then it was my next company that I went to that had, bigger comp plan and bigger this and bigger that, where they had never hired a woman in field sales. So they had zero.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so I had to overcome multiple interviews and multiple, comments. And ultimately, I got hired. And within 90 days, I closed a multi-million-dollar deal,
Mm.
which was great. Worked out well. Timing was good on that one. And it was an opportunity that the previous guy whose territory I took over, this company wouldn't give him an opportunity because they didn't like him. So our company wouldn't have gotten the deal unless I or someone else, had come in to work with this prospective customer. So that made me feel good. Like it wasn't just luck.
Right.
It was really working with a company that said, well, we don't want to work with your company because we don't like this other guy. And I said, well, he's gone. So I'm here. So how do we make this happen? And other people supported me in the company to make it happen. And we closed the deal, and it was a big boon to the bottom line.
Oh my gosh. There's so much from what you just said that I want to take a moment and unpack. And I think for someone could be listening and say they had never hired a woman. Like today, it sounds kind of crazy, even though
Yeah.
I know, yeah, in the conversations you and I get to have with the other women, specifically in the Salesforce influencers group and the women you work with, like there's still a lot that needs to be changed in the community. But
Yeah.
I guess we have to remember it was the 80s, right?
Yeah.
We've made progress. At least we've made progress. But here's the thing I want to ask you about specifically from that. And well done too, by the way, well done. Looking back on that, what were some of the things you did in that moment to win that relationship? Because I think this is probably a lot of what you're teaching women in sales and a lot of how you're empowering women in sales. So how did you win that deal when the company was so shut off because of the former rep?
I just totally leveraged the fact that the other rep was not involved anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't a valid reason, so I wanted them to give me any other reason why we couldn't, because I knew we had some flexibility and I knew we could deliver. I knew a lot of things were going for us. And so they had to be honest, which they were. I guess you don't have to be honest, but they were honest and said, no, we just didn't like that guy. and so
Mm,
and so
yeah.
we never considered you. And so once they were assured that he wasn't anywhere, unfortunately, he got promoted, but he didn't have anything to do with the deal. He didn't get fired. He got promoted, which
Okay.
often happens with people like him.
Yeah.
And but we built a team, and we showed them, we put together a really great response to their request for proposal, and
Mm,
we made it just in time. So it worked out really well.
yeah. And the big piece that I'm taking too from what you said is like you didn't back down. So there was
No.
resistance on the front end, but I'm hearing some of what you probably channeled from your grandmother growing up
Yeah.
too, which was that persistence and that sticking to your guns and your intuition,
Well,
right?
yeah, and in the end, it's okay if someone doesn't buy from us, but you just want to make sure that they really know what you're offering, because I don't mind if someone says no, but I mind if they don't know what it is that I'm offering. So I at least want to present it and get their feedback and get their input. And we hadn't had that opportunity. So I was
Mm,
okay if they decided not to go with us. I just wanted to make sure they knew who we were. And I think that's important for other sellers to remember, that a no is, especially a quick no is the next best thing to a yes. Uh,
mm,
if they don't understand, and you hate it when you hear later on someone says, oh, I wish you would have told us that you had this, that, and the other thing, because that's happened to me, and that kills you, because you had a solution for them and they just didn't know what it was. So I just want to
yeah.
make sure people understand, this is the offering, here's how it could benefit you. If that doesn't make sense to you, that's okay, but please know what it is.
Wow. Such a powerful mindset shift, because I'm thinking back to my days in sales, and even now as an entrepreneur selling my own thing. Like sometimes our brains will tell us, oh, they don't want it, or and it's like, do they even know what it is? Right. And
Yeah,
we will put up these objections before someone has even offered them. So I love your
yeah,
perspective there. I love number one, a quick no is second best to a yes.
yeah,
But then
isn't it?
it is. I love how you phrase that. Yeah. And then number two is, let me just make sure they know what it is. And from there, if it's a no for them, that's fine. I'm
Yeah,
totally great with that.
fair, totally
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah. So I'm curious about what inspired you to start your consultancy. So you had this super successful career in B2B sales, and obviously now you're coaching and training and doing a lot of work with your consultancy to help empower other sales teams and professionals. So what inspired that shift for you?
So I lived in Seattle, and my one and only son went off to go to prep school. He got a scholarship to boarding school in Massachusetts because he played hockey, ice hockey. And I wanted, well, what ultimately happened is that he got a scholarship to play Division I college hockey at Northeastern University, which is a pretty big deal. And I didn't want to miss his college career. So I sold my house, which I had bought at 27 as a single
Mm,
mom because of my sales career. And I moved to the Boston area. And it turned out to be my last corporate job, because I was there for 4 years. And at toward the end, when I was planning to move back to the West Coast anyway, we were going to be acquired. And so the position that I had at that time, I built an inside sales team. I started a corporate university, and our corporate university was tiny, and the company that was going to acquire us had a bigger corporate university. So they took my big salary and put me on a list with all the other big salaries that they could,
yeah.
whittle down. And I was downsized. And
Mm,
so, but they loved what I did, and they ultimately became my first client. So
wow.
for much less money. But
Mm,
nonetheless, I had a
more
beautiful
freedom,
office.
right?
Yeah, I had a beautiful office in Boston until I moved back to Seattle. And it was really wonderful. I made friends and colleagues that I still keep in touch with 20 years later.
It's incredible. It's
Yeah,
incredible. Yeah. And I love it's just kind of this theme of like resilience, and then looking for what's going to support your lifestyle, right? Which
yeah,
is especially for women in sales. It's like many of us, we have children, we have families, we need that freedom.
yeah,
And it's such a perfect fit for that. Now, here's what I want to ask about, and this ties in with your new book, She Sells, that's coming out really, really soon too, as of the
yeah.
recording of this. So you share that we've lost 10% of the women in sales that we had previously, which was eye-opening for me. And so I want to ask first, can you give a little bit of context for that statistic?
Yeah,
So
me
what is that based
too.
on? And what is this
I
loss due to,
I
in your
was
opinion?
really surprised. I'm still really working on verifying the fact that I was talking with Mary Shea of Outreach, and
Okay.
she's formerly a forester, so she's very big on research. And she was looking at two different studies and basically came up with, I think it was more like 8%,
Okay.
but nonetheless, we're not growing women in sales.
Hmm.
And it's very possible that we've lost 8 or 10% of the women. And that's because we had a pandemic. Women step up and take care of family and community issues. whether you have kids or not. They're elders and, people who were sick, and they're, just all sorts of different things. And if you think about it, if you're a sales rep and you have a sick parent or you have kids to deal with, and there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of stress over a couple of year period. And if I have a quota every month or every quarter, what's easier, to give up my quota and maybe move over to customer success or some other customer support role, or I can't really do it. I can't quit my family, so
Right.
and I can't really step out of that. So I think that's where a lot of it. Some women cut their roles down to part-time. There are all sorts of different situations, and there still are women. I talked to them in the month of September when I was traveling to Inbound and to the outreach conference. There are women who are in companies where there's very much still a bro culture. They feel pressured, or they're hearing inappropriate things. They don't feel like their opinion is valued. I talked to one woman in Boston at a party outside of Inbound who told me that she was pregnant. She had a pandemic baby, and her doctor begged her to quit her job because her boss was verbally harassing her, and to the point that she was getting ill from it. So, it's like,
Oh my gosh.
it's just unbelievable. I heard so many news stories about things that are happening in 2022 that make me realize it's not just about finding more women and filling a pipeline and hiring them. It's about having places where women are welcome and appreciated and heard and valued. And women can do amazing things in sales roles and also as leaders. And so it's just a matter of, both the company and women. We need both sides. We need to get more women into sales, but we also need to have an atmosphere where people are valued and appreciated.
Totally agree with you. I do want to speak to both sides of those, because I think that's really important. And to echo what you said, it's so interesting as I have just more conversations with incredible women on this show who are still tied into that corporate world, and hearing that story that you just shared about the woman you talked to last month. And then at the time of this recording, it will have been the episode we aired last week with two women from Mendoza Ventures, which is a female-backed VC firm. And one of the women talked about how in a former job, when she was pregnant, her boss recommended that she get an abortion. And it's like, this stuff it blows my mind when I hear these stories. And I truly aim to focus on the solution always, because I think that's how we're going to make progress. But still, sometimes I'm like, I can't believe this stuff goes on. But I think back to when I was in corporate not that long ago, like 7 years ago, there was a lot of stuff going on. Yeah. So, all right, Lori, what's the solution? You got it. Come fix it all.
The solution is that we hire more women into executive leadership, because companies with more women leaders hire more women in sales. So that's, and diverse people. I would say, someone commented on my blog post today and said, I identify as they, but I love what you're saying about women in sales. And I said, you're part of this group. So we want to see sellers that reflect who our buyers are, and buyers have changed. And it's not the same group that it was years ago. And we need all sorts of diversity and the ability to build an inclusive sales team.
Absolutely. So I want to look at that from kind of two different lenses. So the core solution that you're seeing is more women in sales leadership, more diversity in sales leadership. From a company standpoint, if I'm listening to this, and I don't care what your gender is, because I know we have all genders that listen to this, but if I'm in leadership within an organization, what are some things I should be doing and thinking about right now to help make that happen?
Yeah, I posted today on my LinkedIn that people should, so there are some leaders, some male leaders, and some great, amazing people that I know in sales There are some who think, well, I'm really open and we totally, we have some women and we're totally doing great things. But one of my colleagues that I used to work with, and his name is Shep Maher. Shout out to Shep. He's in San Francisco. He's a great leader at BetterWorks. And he would still go back to his team and he would go to the women and say, give me some feedback. What can I do better? Because he never, I've said in the post that I'm like, just because you think you're woke and you have this all figured out, we don't, and none of us have this figured out.
Yeah.
So if you're male and you're working really hard to do your part, thank you so much. And keep asking the people around you, ask the women, what else, what can we do better? Ask everybody for that matter. And that's one of the best things that a leader can do. And individuals, whether you're an individual contributor, SDR, BDR, AE, what have you, if you know a woman that might be struggling in a role, see if there's a way to be of support to help her, because I've seen some bad situations where someone is just written off, kind of like, well, I'm not going to help them. I've seen managers do that to reps where it's like they don't listen, so that's it.
Yeah.
And you can't do that. You can't write people off if they're in your organization. So I would say, help other people, recommend podcasts that are led by women like you and I, as a change to the other podcasts that everybody listens to, or books that are written by women for everyone in sales. They're not just about women. They're not just for women. So that's a way to be a little more diverse in your thinking. And look for things that are different and not just the same old.
I love that. And so I'm curious about the volume of women that are applying for these roles, because it is a two-way street, right? So company leadership can be proactively seeking to place more women in these roles. And you probably have a greater pulse on this than I do. What does that landscape look like right now? Are more women proactively applying for leadership? Like, what are you hearing in your conversations?
Yeah, I hear that. I hear all sorts of different things. Sometimes they are, sometimes people don't see it. And I will encourage them to look at what they're posting, look at, what they're actually writing about. There are ways to improve the job description, for example, so that it's more appealing to not just men, but also women. And
can you give some specifics there?
Yeah, if you have too many bullet points in an ad, for example, if it's like 2/3 of the page, women are not interested in that because it seems like too many requirements. Because as women, we want to meet the requirements as much as we can, 100% if we can. If you are an employer and you say, if you don't meet all the requirements, please apply anyway, you're going to get more women, because men are more like 60%. Hey, they'd be lucky to have me, right? Yeah. So I don't have all the qualifications, but I'm throwing my hat in the ring. Whereas women don't, it's not a confidence thing in my mind. It's more like we don't want to waste their time. We don't want to waste our time, because why would I apply to something that I'm not fully qualified for? So it's more like we want to match up to the rules, and men are just, the renegades, and they're just gonna, maybe they'll catch somebody's attention, and good for them. We need to be, we could be more like that. So I tell women too, is that if you don't meet all the requirements, apply anyway. There's no downside. But I also believe that you should build relationships, so you're not just throwing resumes into a hole somewhere. And somebody's going through it, with AI pulling out words, like that's not the best way to get a job. Yeah. So build relationships. Women need to build relationships and know the companies that they're interested to go to, and see who else works with or around those people that work at that company, and then build relationships that way.
Are there any specifics to doing that today? And I'm curious, as I ask this right now, my husband is applying for these medical schools, and it's like, you know, he puts the resume out there and puts in the application. And my sales brain is like, you need to connect with them on LinkedIn. You need to get to know them. I actually had to like fly out and go show up on campus of a place and go try to meet them. And so that's kind of how, you know, when we're in sales, like our brains work that way, but I don't think everyone does that. And, or maybe there's a better way. And plus people are so busy today. They're scanning stuff. There's AI. What are you seeing that's working to build those relationships online?
Yeah, I think it's just good old relationship building, good old fashioned. That's something that hasn't changed over the years. There are different mediums, there are different ways to do it through LinkedIn. I would encourage people to talk with people who are LinkedIn experts that teach ways to build relationships. I just heard a presentation last week from Bryn Tillman, and she is amazing. She has so many tips and so many helpful ideas that someone like her is a really good resource to get ready. And you can also have people review your resumes, and you know, there are all sorts of different services to do that. But bottom line, build relationships. And even today, someone posted in a group I'm in, you know, I have this really great friend who is, you know, just got laid off. And if you know any roles for this, or this. And I said to the person, I said, you know, he should come back. It's a guy. I said, he should come back with, these are the 5 companies I'm most interested in, because that's easier for me as a referrer than for me to go, oh, who do I know in product management or whatever it was, because that's harder work for my brain. It's easier for me to go, well, let me chat. Let me just look on LinkedIn Sales Navigator and I'll find out who I know. So that's something that people can do that would be helpful.
Make it easy for other people to help you. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
In building relationships. Yeah. So I'd love to speak for a moment, Lori, about this concept that you teach about supportive versus unsupportive beliefs. And we were talking about this in the pre-chat. I'm huge on mindset, so I think our listeners are going to be really interested in your take on this, because I think this is a kind of a different presentation of some of what I love talking about on this show. And I want, for everyone listening, I want you to listen in, whether you're going for a promotion, going for a new job, going for your financial up level in your life. Maybe you're an entrepreneur and you've got a big goal you want to hit before the end of the year, and listen to this part with that in mind, just for some context. So talk to us more about these supportive versus unsupportive beliefs.
Well, and first, to do this, I'm going to just mention that my son was an athlete. As I said, he played Division I college hockey. We've been around a lot of athletes from pro to college and beyond. And what I noticed when I would go to any sports game, whether it's a baseball game or basketball, for me, I love hockey. And I'm kind of odd that way, I think. But what I noticed was, you know, the home team always supports the players. So if you're the home audience, you know, we're cheering on our home players. And the good players that come from the away game, the away team, you know, we boo them sometimes, like boo, you know, but you never boo the home players. And I take that to heart with ourselves. You never put yourself down, not really. Maybe you joke around about it. I don't, but don't put yourself down and support yourself. And that's where supportive and unsupportive beliefs come from. If you catch yourself saying, oh, this is never going to work because I tried it before and it didn't work, that's an unsupportive belief. Instead, it's okay to catch that you said that, because we're not going to ban negativity in our brains. We have so many messages in our heads, and most of them are negative that we have in our heads, things that we would never say to other people, right, Elise? Right. And so, but the next time you catch one to yourself, just recognize, like, ooh, that's not supportive. That's not helping me to my goal. So how can I flip that and say, you know, Mondays are good. Monday, I have the whole week ahead to do great things. When I woke up today, I just had a flu shot, and I just got back from a week of travel, and it would have been easy to be like, I got a little headache, you know, and this and that. And instead I thought, oh, I'm going to get all caught up this week from all the things that I've been, you know, and not having to deal with as I was traveling. So I have to do that myself, catch myself And if I said something like, oh, but it's going to be hard, it's like, yeah, but I got a great opportunity ahead. It's a
Oh,
new day. Like, you can't get any better than that. And so when people, whether you say it to yourself or you're in a sales meeting and someone else says, oh, we'll never get that account because they didn't go with us last time. So that's an unsupportive belief. And if you catch someone else doing it, it's really easy to be able to say to them without going, Elise, you're so negative. Instead, you catch it and say, that doesn't really support us to our goal of hitting our numbers by the end of the quarter. How could we turn that into something more supportive? And most people
mm,
can relate to that, because now I'm not putting you down. I'm just putting down the fact that we need to say things to ourselves and to others, people around us, and particularly in our heads, things that help move us forward. And to do that, we don't have room for unsupportive beliefs that are just going to undermine all our best efforts.
yeah. So am I understanding correctly that, because this is different than positive versus negative beliefs,
Right.
because so the difference is that carries a bit more judgment with it,
Yeah,
whether we're judging ourselves for thinking the negative
I
belief
think
or judging
so.
somebody else. But the real
Yeah.
question here to ask yourself, and tell me if I'm on the right path with this, is, does this belief support the goal? Like, does this
Yeah.
belief support what I want to do? Or if it doesn't, let me pick a different one.
Yeah,
Is that right?
exactly. It makes it
Mhm.
so much easier and less judgment, like you said. And
Yeah,
and I don't have to say, oh, I'm being so negative.
right.
Instead, it's like I had an unsupportive belief. So how can I flip that? And no matter what it is, you and I could talk about the lack of women in sales, and we could make it pretty unsupportive if we want to,
Mm,
as things have been going on for years, and there are predictions about how many years it's going to take for women to be more equal in business. And instead of doing that, we're talking about other things that are supportive, like, well, here's what we can do. It's
yeah.
Women in Sales Month in October. We can do this, and we can shine a light on that. And so those are all constructive, supportive things that we can do, rather than just dwelling on what hasn't worked and what didn't work and what might not work.
I love that little flip of positioning
Yeah,
on it, because it really does take the judgment away. And I think it feels easier to move from an unsupportive belief to a supportive belief than a negative to a positive
yes,
belief. So
yes,
that's really
I
good.
agree. Yeah.
Lori, before we wrap, and this conversation has been so good, I'd love if you could share a little bit more about your book. So your book, She Sells: Attract, Promote, and Retain Great Women in B2B Sales. I know that's coming out really soon as of the time
Yes.
of this recording. So share with us a little bit more about the book, who it's for, how people are going to benefit, and then we'll share with them also where they can go and get a copy.
Yes, I wrote the book mostly for sales leaders and company leaders who, on an ongoing basis, have trouble finding women to apply for their roles, or having them successfully go through the process, or if they're hired, they may not stay. So there are a lot of tips and tricks, and this is really a book based on what we've seen work and not work, and really sharing kind of a tactical how-tos book. It's not really for women to inspire. That's probably another book that's going to come out, but I do think the women that have read it think that it is kind of inspiring in some ways, because
Mm,
there are ways to better hire, and there are ways to better onboard and and retain and coach and promote women in sales roles. So
mm.
this is all about the how-tos to do that. And we have a landing page, womensalespros.com/she sells, where people can pre-order or order, depending on when
Yeah.
this comes out, but it will be out in the next few weeks.
Amazing. Amazing. It's so needed. And it feels like, as you were talking, I was like, it's a very supportive book to everyone in sales leadership. So
Yeah.
I know it's so needed. I would love to, Lori, can you share a little bit more about Women's Sales Pros and how someone can get involved in that if they're interested?
Yeah, Women's Sales Pros is the megaphone for all the women in sales groups. So we made a decision about a year ago that we wanted that there are about 10 or 12 women in sales groups that have sprouted up in the last few handful of years. And we want to help highlight events that are coming up for all the different groups. So we have a newsletter that comes out twice a month right now, and people can sign up at womenssalespros.com. That's probably the best thing to do. We're also building a greater community beyond our experts. Right now we have a group of 50 top sales experts. We just had our annual event, and which was amazing. And but a lot of other people want to have some connection to us. So we're going to be building a free community around that as well going into 2023.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I'd love to get more involved too, because I just think
Yeah.
the work you're doing is so needed and phenomenal and really powerful. So thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you think is important for someone listening? It could be a word of advice. It can be something that you wish you knew coming up in sales, but I want to just kind of give you space and time if there's anything I haven't asked that you think is important.
You need to believe in yourself in sales, no matter who you are. And there are ways that you can improve that if you don't feel strong about it. For me, I got into programs like Toastmasters, which was, worldwide, and it's very inexpensive. And I took a Dale Carnegie course one time. I did all sorts of different things so that I could be as strong as I could in terms of communicating and articulating. And you can become a student of communications just by looking every week at things on the internet. So much great content that's available on communications, on how to be more empathetic, on all the different topics that salespeople and sales professionals need, that there's no excuse not to continue to develop professionally on an ongoing basis. So I would encourage people to make time to do that every week.
Yeah, that's amazing. Lori, thank you so much for coming on. We will link the book below. We'll link Women's Sales Pros below as well. And
Thanks, Elise.
Absolutely. Yeah. For you, my listener, go connect with Lori, get on either the order or the pre-order list for her book, and join Women's Sales Pros as well. I mean, what a great community. So thank you again, Lori, for the great and powerful work you're doing in our space. It's so, so needed.
Thanks, Elise.
Absolutely. All right. To you, my listener, thank you for listening in today. So grateful for you as always. Go connect with Lori, go check out her resources, give her a shout out on social. And we're always so honored when you share these episodes with your community as well, and just help get the word out. You can head over to elisearcher.com for more great resources to help you grow your sales and financial abundance. And I will see you on our next episode of She Sells